Alright, hello guys. I just want to do a quick review on fractions and decimals. And first of all, I just want to remind you that a fraction and a decimal is any amount that would be less than 1. What does that mean? That they're smaller than 1. 1 is always going to be greater. Okay, and I want to remind you that decimals work in the power of 10, meaning that you need 10 hundredths to make a tenth, 10 tenths to make one whole, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my number line and I'm going to divide it into 10 parts, right? 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and I have to remember that decimals, we start at 0, then we go 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, and then we have 5/10, which is the same thing as 1/2. It's half of 1. 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and then we have one whole. All right. So, how do decimals represent fractions? Same way. So we have one whole that's cut into 10 equal parts, and those signs are supposed to be equal, by the way. But I'll try to make them equal next time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how 1/10 basically is the same thing as 1 over 10. That means that you have one piece out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 tenths is the same thing as 2 over 10. And so on. 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, 8 tenths, 9 tenths, and 10 over 10. And we know that when we have a fraction whose numerator is the same as the denominator, that means 1. You have one whole. All right, so remember that fractions are amounts that are less than 1. So if they're asking you to put 5/10 as a fraction, that would be equivalent to 5 over 10 or 5/10. If they were to ask you to put 3/10 as a fraction, that would be equivalent to 3 over 10. Now, what happens when they give you a whole number in a decimal? So let's say they give you 3.2 or 3 and 2/10. That would be the same thing as 3 and 2 over 10. The 3 is the whole number and the decimal would be the fraction. And like I said earlier, fractions are equivalent to decimals. Well, not equivalent, but they represent part of a whole. Okay, so let's do another one. Let's say you have 5 and 7/10. That would be the same thing as 5 over 7 out of 10. Now let's say they give us a fraction, a mixed number. Mixed number is a whole number with a fraction. That would be the same thing as 8 and 8/10. And so far I have been talking about tenths and not so much about hundredths. And if you guys remember, hundredths are the smaller parts. It's when you take 1/10, and again, going back to the power of 10, you divide 1/10 into 10 parts. And then you have hundredths, and then you have 10 hundredths, which is 1/10, 20 hundredths, which is 2/10, 30 hundredths, 3/10, 40 hundredths, which is 4/10, 50 hundredths, which is 5/10, and then so on up until you get 9 hundredths, which is 9/10, and then you have 100 hundredths, which is one whole, or 10 tenths, if you guys remember that. So what happens when they give you a decimal like that? Well, let's do some examples like that. Okay, so what happens if they tell you I have 800s, and how do I know it's 800s? Do your place value, tenths, hundreds. Okay, so that would be 8 over 100. How do we know that? Because we're in the hundredths place value, so it needs to be out of 100. It's not the same thing as 8 tenths. It's in the tenths place value, right? So that's 8 out of 10 parts. Let's do another one. What happened if we had 2500ths? How do we write that as a fraction? Well, again, our number goes to the hundredths place value. So that would be 25 out of, what's our place value? 100. So 25 out of 100. Now let's go ahead and add a whole number. Let's say we had 4 and 25. And remember, you can think of decimals as money, $4.25. That would mean that we have 4 whole, that would mean that we have 4, and then we have 25 pennies. Out of how many pennies do we need to make another dollar? 100. Now let's go and give you a fraction. Let's say I have, let's do 5. All right, 5 out of 89 over 100. Okay, again, that would be 5 and 89 hundredths. The place value right here is what tells me that it's out of 100, because the last digit is in the hundredths place. What happens if we have something more tricky, like, let's do 3 and 5 hundredths, okay? So we know that we have ones, tenths, and hundredths. Okay, so we know that we have 3 wholes, and then we have to think about it. Do we have 5 out of 10 or 5 out of 100? And according to the place value, it's telling me that I have 5 out of 100, so that's going to be 5 over 100. And you can even put a 0 there, but you know, you don't need it. So it's 3 and 5 out of 100. Now let's do one more. Let's say we have 9 out of 9 and 7 hundredths. Again, ones, tenths, hundredths. We know that that would be 9 wholes. That would be our mixed fraction or mixed number. And we have 7. And do we have 7 out of tenths or 7 out of 100? We have 7 out of 100, so that would be 100. Now what happens if they give you a mixed number and you have to make it into a decimal? Well, let's go ahead and do a few examples like that. Okay, so they gave us 5 and set fraction 25, and obviously it has to be over 100. How would you make that into a decimal? So we have 5, and we know we have 25 out of 100, so let's make sure that our last digit ends up in the hundredths place. Okay, our first one would be the ones because of the decimal being there, the placement. Then we have the 2, which is tenths and hundredths. Oh, 5 hundredths. Okay, so 5 and 25 hundredths. Let's do one more. 9 and 32 hundredths. Okay, well, I have 9 wholes. Okay, let's put that in my ones place. And then I have 32. Have to make sure that my last digit ends in the hundredths place. So tenths, hundredths, in my hundredths place, I'm sorry. And it does. And that's how you write 9 32 hundredths, which equals 9 and 32 hundredths. Okay, another one. 7 and 5 over 100. So pay close attention to this one. I could simply go 7 and 5 5, there you go, 7 and 5 hundredths, but we're talking out of 100, okay? So think about it. We have ones, and then our first place value would be tens. Do we have 5 out of 10 or do we have 5 out of 100? We have 5 out of 100. So we have the 5 in the wrong place value. So this would not work. It would have to be 7. And then we have 0, tens, and we have 5 hundreds. So now I had to put that 0 to let you know that I don't have any tens. I only have 5 out of 100. So how do I check my ones, my tens, and my hundreds? And that's it. Hopefully this video helped you out a little bit, and if it doesn't, please let me know. And if you want to give me a specific question, go ahead and send it my way.